Raising Chickens 101. You know, we all have our reasons for wanting to raise chickens. We're just going to go over some of the popular reasons. We'll talk about legality and illegality when it comes to chickens. Where can you go if you haven't already gotten your chicks or chickens, pullets, perhaps, where you can go to get those guys. And then raising chickens, you sort of break it out into two sections, the first 60 days and then after those 60 days. Those are the two main sort of steps with chickens. And then next steps, where you go from here. So I love this picture. First of all, this is why I love chickens, is these two omelets. The one on the left is from the store. The one on the right was from my chickens. And I just love that visual because it shows you what's inside. That nice, beautiful yellow yolk that just makes the whole thing look so great. So those fresh, great tasting eggs, all the nutrition from either eggs or from meat. Are people mostly doing laying chickens? Laying chickens? Okay, perfect. We will focus on layers then. If you ever have any questions about meat kind of stuff, feel free to contact me. I'd be happy to discuss that with you. So they're easy and relatively inexpensive to maintain when compared to other animals, you know, things like dogs and cats and stuff like that. You know, we were discussing special needs. You know, there are some chickens with special needs out there, but you're probably not going to bring them to the vet as often as you would with a dog and that sort of thing. So they can be relatively inexpensive. Purchasing chickens can be between $3 to $30 per chicken, depending on the breed and age. If you get a really rare chicken, I've seen chickens going for like $30-40 a chicken, which always floored me. But you can also get chickens as little as like $3 a chick, something like that. Coops, you know, can run anywhere between $50 to $600. If you're making them yourself using recycled materials, stuff like that, it's a great way of cutting costs when you're making your coop. You can also buy pre-made coops. They have Taj Mahal of coops available online, and those are going to be running into the multiple hundreds of dollars. Feed, approximately $15 a month, and miscellaneous stuff, you know, $10 a month, replacing a waterer, you know, making sure you've got more, you know, feed and everything that you need, chicken scratch, all that sort of stuff.
When you say 15, sorry to interrupt, but when you say $15 a month, you mean per chicken?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, so per chicken, you know, $15 a month for feed, $10 for miscellaneous stuff, you know, getting like pine shavings for the floor and that sort of thing, things that need to be maintained on a monthly or regular basis at least. They're really great at controlling weeds and bugs. You will never have a bug issue if you have chickens because they love the bugs. They're really great at eating up all those kinds of bugs. They're really great at weed control too. I've worked with a lot of farms that use chickens as weed control once they had their crops grown to a certain height so they wouldn't be threatened by the chickens. The chickens would be allowed to run through and they'd eat all the little greenies. So that's a great way of weed control, is by letting those chickens out there. World's best fertilizer. It's awesome. Really, really high in nitrogen. So high, in fact, that you cannot apply it directly to plants because you will get nitrogen burn on your plants. But when composted and gone through the process, it's a beautiful, beautiful fertilizer for your gardens, for any sort of landscaping, trees, shrubbery, all that sort of stuff. They're also really fun and friendly pets. And I know that sounds sort of silly, fun and friendly with personality, but I think you guys all have a healthy respect for chicken pets, it seems like. Those who have taken in special needs birds as well. Yeah.
That's what I feel.
And the key to maintaining a fun and friendly chicken is by handling them. After that first 60 days, and before then, you can handle them a little bit, make sure that you've got clean hands before and afterwards, all that sort of stuff. But getting them to know the kids, getting them to know their surroundings and just handling them and making sure that they know that it's okay to be handled will make them a lot easier to handle once they're grown up because they're used to it. They grew up with it, quite literally. So they are really great pets, and you will really discover their personalities. They're really, really cute. They might be shy, or, you know, they might have like little cliques and friendships and stuff like that. They're really interesting creatures. I really love all the different dynamics when it comes to chickens. So legality. For Summit County, which is what I'm going to be talking about specifically, it's unincorporated Summit County, which can legally have chickens at this point. Are all of you guys in unincorporated Summit County? Some people not. It's okay if you're not. I won't call you into the authorities or anything like that, but it's something you want to be aware of. I do have extra copies of the zoning regulations, so if anyone is unsure of what these look like, I have an extra copy. It's also available on our website. It is important to look over that sort of stuff because you want to know what you're getting into. You don't want the cops to knock on your door and be like, hey lady, like, you gotta take your chickens away. You just want to avoid that. So, no roosters. Any guesses why they probably don't want roosters? Noise. Definitely noise. And roosters, their personalities can run the gamut. There's some really violent roosters. Some that are really sweet. I don't want to give them a bad name. But yeah, roosters, not so much fun. So, do you need a rooster to have hens? No. You do not need a rooster to have hens. You only need a rooster if you want eggs fertilized, if you're going in that route. Otherwise, roosters, you don't need them. Hens are great on their own. Depending on where you're at, you can have up to 3 hens per family, or if you're doing a project, if you're doing something with combining families, you can have more hens. So make sure you review the zoning regulations. If you have questions about these zoning regulations, I'd be happy to talk through them with you. We can also go and talk to the towns and all that sort of stuff. You also want,
question about the 3. Last year when they were talking about the regulations, I thought it was significantly higher than that.
it depends on your acreage and it depends on where you're at. Where are you guys located?
Unincorporated farms corner half.
You would probably be able to have at least 6 then because of the acreage. You need to have a certain amount of space both in your coop and out of your coop depending on the number of birds. But we can look at the zoning regulations specifically for that area if you guys are interested. Also important to double check with your homeowners association. You guys brought that up a little bit. HOAs, you want to make sure, okay, even if you're in unincorporated, if your HOA says that you can't have chickens, you can take that up with them, but they're still in charge of your property if you're a part of an HOA. So it's really important to talk to them. You don't want to invest your time, money, and effort into something just for your HOA to be like, hey, get rid of the birds. So you want to make sure homeowners is aware of what you are doing. Make sure you have a proper coop and run. I'll just hand these zoning regulations around. You can take a peek at them, and because they do have some regulations specifically about the coop. Height, visibility, all that sort of stuff. So it is important to check out that information before you start investing time into building something. Make sure you have a good relationship with your neighbors. You don't want them to, all of a sudden come out one day and realize that you have chickens and be upset about it. And it's really great to get them involved in the process beforehand. If you're able to go talk to them over a cup of tea and say, hey, I'm getting chickens, if you want some free eggs, and I'm not going to have a rooster, don't worry. All those kinds of things are a great way of putting neighbors at ease. There are a lot of people out there who are uncomfortable with the idea of chickens. And you want to make sure that those who are going to be next door to you are going to be comfortable with what's going on. So that way you don't have strained neighborhood relationships. Any questions about that? I'm sort of breezing over it because I want to make sure we have time for questions and answers at the end, but I'm happy to take anything in between. If you have any thoughts about this. Yeah.
What is the consequence if you have chickens or you're not supposed to have chickens?
Having read through the regulations quite a few times, it seems like any other zoning kind of thing. If you build a shed in your backyard and they don't know about it, you might be caught eventually. There might be a fine associated with it, but it's one of those things, if they catch you, they catch you. If they don't, they don't. Just like any other kind of zoning regulation, they won't send you to prison or anything like that unless you're cockfighting on your property or something like that.
In which case, I'll come and get you.
Yeah. But no, there isn't a lot of teeth to the regulations. So if you're concerned about, if you're on the edge of unincorporated and incorporated, you can ask around, see if anyone else has chickens or has tried to have chickens and had them bit it in the butt. Mm-hmm. But, if you've got 3 or 4 hens, they're tucked away, they're not visible from the road, you don't have a lot of noise issues, your neighbors are in on it, then I'd say it's worth the risk. And, you know, if they find out, they find out, but how long is it going to take for them to find out?
Right.
You know, the only people who really get caught are those who don't involve their HOA and don't involve their neighbors, because the neighbor comes out and they're like, what the hell is that sound?
Right.
You know, then they figure out what it is, and, you know, they think that chickens are roosters and that they're monsters and that they're going to eat their babies, then they might report you.
Not the special one.
No, not the special one. Yeah, the special one's
okay.
okay.
But my next door neighbor, I went, I got chickens, and she said, a friend of ours gave us 2 for the kids. Oh, God, what are we going to do now? So and that's the same side where the coop is. So they have 2, they're building the coop for theirs right now.
There you go. See, you've got a mutual thing going on. They won't report you, you won't
We
report
can't
them.
have my chickens and
I'll say right now that I know plenty of people who do have illegal chickens in Summit County, but it's something that you want to look into, you know, because I don't want you to put in the time and effort into something and you put your coop right out in front of your house, you know, it's going to get taken down or it's going to be fined. You're going to be fined. It's just not going to be a fun experience. So you want to make sure you do the research as far as, like, you know, what other people have experienced, what your neighbors are comfortable with, you know, your location and all that sort of stuff. And those zoning regulations are available online too, so if we need more than one copy, then we can get that from online. Oh, the legalities of chickens. So, where to get baby chicks and chickens. So you guys are picking yours up, correct? Coming up soon. You already have yours, and you guys are looking to get them?
Probably not this year.
Okay, probably not this year, but you don't have them yet.
Correct.
Okay, perfect. So we've got stuff running the gamut. So anyone who has experience with researching chickens and stuff like that, feel free to share your information with those who have not yet gone into this process.
There's a ton on Craigslist.
There are.
Every single age, every single breed, it's just
Check
every
out
single
Craigslist
price
too.
breed. Craigslist is all sorts of resources.
Absolutely. So you
What?
want to start off before you...
No, they've got them in Denver, Brookfield, Commerce City.
Yeah.
So before you start shopping, you want to know what you're shopping for, and that's going to be the breed. So you want to start by picking out breeds, and I have on the resource page that everyone got to learn more about chicken breeds. I have a book, Stories Illustrated Guide to Poultry Breeds, which is good. But that first link, backyardchickens.com, that is like the best website for backyard chicken stuff. They have this really great, it's almost like shopping on Amazon kind of thing. You pick out the characteristics or the traits that you want, and it pulls up breeds that fall into those categories. It's really easy, user-friendly. But you want to think about things like cold hardy breeds. There are breeds of birds that don't do well in cold climates, and make sure you don't get one of them. You also want to think about, do you want an egg bird or a meat bird? It sounds like most people are into layers. So you want to make sure that you are getting a laying breed. If you don't get a laying breed, if you get a meat breed, you're not going to get as many eggs, but you're going to get big buff chickens. You also want to think about if heritage breeds are important to you or not. There are a lot of different breeds out there, just like there's a lot of different kinds of tomatoes. You want to make sure that you're getting something that you're proud of, that it's not something that's been genetically modified. Are you comfortable with a hybrid chicken? Are you not? Heritage breeds are really interesting breeds. They're really great. They sort of run the gamut, and a lot of times they're a lot hardier than a lot of the hybrid birds are because they're not meant for mass production. They're meant for staying alive. So I always recommend heritage breeds, but whatever you pick out, make sure you do a little research about the breed first. Just like picking out a puppy dog or something like that. You want to know what you're getting into because they do have their own characteristics and they do have their own kind of traits, so you want to make sure you know what you're getting. There's a couple of different ways that you can get your birds. Local feed stores, Murdoch's, that's where you got your chicks, right? Was that Murdoch's? You want to tell folks about that experience a little bit?
I asked them if they were winter hardy, if they were cold hardy.
Yep.
And if they were layers or meat. And they said they're dual purpose breeds. And
She just fell in love with a kid chick. She didn't care.
No, I wanted to have chickens for a long time, and so once this came up and Murdoch's had chicks, I got them. So I got two, mine were in twos. I got Partridge Rocks, I got Buff Rocks, and I got Colombian Wyandotte.
Nice.
And the Buff Rocks seem to be more aggressive, except one of them's really shy. So, you know,
See those personality traits
no,
coming
they do.
out.
Yeah, they do. And the Partridge Rocks were really shy, and they're becoming a bit more bold. Some of them will peck food out of your hand, and some of them will just look at you.
Mhm.
Please drop it. It's kind of like my golden retriever. Please drop it.
Please.
She won't take it from you.
Yeah, so you can go to Murdoch's or any kind of feed stores. There's a lot of them down in Denver too to be able to pick up those kinds of chicks. And it's good that you ask questions. You know, things like, what are the breeds? Are they cold hardy? The dual purpose is great. It's the best of both worlds. You're still going to get some good meat on them, but they're still going to lay eggs. They won't lay as heavily as a layer breed, but they also won't produce as much meat as a meat breed. So it's a nice in-between. So
But they have enough bulk that that's one of the reasons they tend to be cold hardy is because they have
Exactly.
enough bulk.
Exactly.
Not these little skinny frail things with the real tight feathers.
Yeah, nice big feathers, nice strong birds. Those are always good things to look for. Other questions that you might want to ask when you're picking up birds are vaccinations. Have they been vaccinated? Do they need to be vaccinated? If they have not been vaccinated, it's usually not worth doing. It's something that you need to do within like the first day or two of life. Most places do it anyways, but it's a good thing to know in case you get home and one of them has a weird thing, and then all of a sudden the rest of them have weird things, and then your kid has a weird thing, and so you want to make sure that they're inoculated for those kinds of things that can spread to people. You can also reduce any kind of spreading by making sure that your hands are clean before you handle a chick, in between you handling one chick and another chick, and then making sure that you clean your hands when you're done. Make sure kids don't stick their hands in their mouth or on their face while they're playing with chicks, anything like that. Another fun thing to do with kids at home is you can buy eggs, fertilized eggs, and get them hatching at home in an incubator. Should you have a hand up?
Yeah, I was wondering if there was, if living in this climate, people have realized or discovered, done any kind of anecdotal research on what breeds actually do well here.
Specifically in Summit County, not
Or
a
at
lot
this
of
altitude.
research. Not a lot of
Cold.
research at altitude, but cold hardy is what you're going to be looking for. And cold hardy will give you the best breeds that'll do well at this kind of climate and this
And what are the
altitude.
cold hardy breeds?
I would be happy to hand out a list.
Oh.
Let me write that down really quick. Yeah, if everyone's signed in, I can send out a list of cold hardy breeds. But otherwise, you can go to that first link, learning more about breeds, and you can just type in cold hardy. It'll bring them all up. But I mean, there's hundreds of breeds that are cold hardy.
Okay. Sarah, are these cold hardy?
Very much so.
And then when you talk about, if you ask, where else, I guess half the people don't know, the other half maybe know a little bit, but if you ask that question, are they being vaccinated, are they going to know against what? I mean, if they get vaccinated is against like 3 different types of strands of.
If they're
Flu.
vaccinated, then they've gotten all the vaccinations. They don't vaccinate some and not for the other. There's sort of like a main vaccination that they all get on the first day. Otherwise, you can also get chick feed that has some sort of inoculation in it as well. So that's an option if they weren't vaccinated. Yeah,
Murdoch's doesn't have, the hatchery they get them from does not vaccinate.
it doesn't vaccinate. Okay. Yeah, I mean, some people do, some people don't, just like some people vaccinate their kids and some people don't. It is totally up to the individual. So you can hatch your own chicks at home in an incubator. You can make an incubator. You can buy an incubator. They're very easy to make. And it's a lot of fun, too, because you can see them hatch. So that's a really fun way of doing things. And once they've hatched, then it's just like you've got the chicks from the store. You can also buy already hatched chicks or pullets. A pullet is like a teenage chicken, which is what it sounds like you guys are getting. If they're already laying, that's right around pullet age. So that's ideal because you're not having to deal with that, first 60 days kind of, handling and all the transferring of one place from inside the house to the
As they got
garage.
bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah, exactly. So once they're already pullets, it's pretty easy and straightforward from there. And Craigslist. Don't forget about Craigslist. That's a great way if you're not so picky about the breeds, if you've got a general idea of like, okay, there's these 8 cold hardy breeds that I'm comfortable with, let's go on Craigslist and look. That's a great way of doing it, especially if it's someone who's close by. Then you can go and pick them up. You can get chicks in the mail. It's really, really funny. Usually the post office worker calls you because they're like, oh my God, your package is chirping, and I don't know why. But it says things like, handle safely animals, and they're usually pretty hungry and thirsty by the time that they get to you. But it's a really interesting way of getting your chicks. So the first 60 days, you'll need a chick brooder. So a brooder is sort of like a real big incubator kind of thing. So you want to maintain temperature, 90 to 95 degrees Fahrenheit for the first week, and then decreasing 5 degrees every week. And the chicks are a really good temperature sensor themselves. If you have a brooder set up and then you've got a red light, so like one of those French fry kind of lights that, give off the heat, if it's too low to the ground, all your chicks will be against the edge of the brooder. If it's too cold and it's too high up, all the chicks will be right underneath the light looking up at it, trying to stay as close as possible. If they're evenly distributed within the brooder, it's probably 90 to 95 degrees. It's always good to check, but they'll tell you if something's wrong because they don't want to be too hot or too cold. You can tell if they got, if they get sweaty and they're like laying out with their wings all out furled and everything like that. It's a pretty good idea that they're not comfortable. And then you want to have something underfoot because I'm sure as those who already have chickens or those who will be having chickens soon, they poop a lot, all the time. So you want to make sure that there's something easy that you can clean up. And that's something too you want to keep in mind when you're designing your coop, is that you want to be able to get inside your coop, and you want to be able to get inside your coop with a shovel or something to be able to pick up, or at least be able to open it up and like rake it out, something like that, because you are going to have to change the bedding on a regular basis. Some people use newspaper in their brooders. I'm not a huge fan of newspaper because it doesn't really absorb that much moisture, and it gets really slippery. And the chicks like fall over and they land in their own goo, and you don't want that. So I'm not a huge fan of newspaper. Some people do it though, and I'm sure someone would argue with me about the advantages of newspaper. But I like pine shavings or corn cob bedding, something like that, because it's a little bit more absorbent, and even when it does get wet, they're at least not going to like fall over on themselves on it.
What about all of the chipping that they're doing now of the pine beetle wood? Is that too coarse?
That's going to be too coarse. You want a shaving more than a wood chip, because a wood chip would be so big, they'll get their legs stuck in it and that sort of thing. That's a good question. You want to make sure that they have access to food and water. There are special chick crumbles, and that's just for these first 60 days, or those chick crumbles. They're nice and small. They've got a different kind of nutrient balance for chicks. And then the waterer, these are great waterers, these little plastic guys. And the big thing about it is making sure that it stays at about chest level on them. So when they're really, really little, you can have that kind of thing right on the floor on the brooder, and then you can slowly add some height to it as they start to grow a little. If you keep it really low, they'll kick stuff into it all day long. And if you get a lot of, fertilizer in there, that's not going to be healthy for them if they're drinking water that's contaminated like that. When chicks are in a brooder, you want to make sure this water stays nice and clean, and you want them to have access to it all the time. You don't want them to be going thirsty. So I think it's important almost on a daily, if not every other day kind of basis, take this out, even if there's water in it, and just clean the whole thing. It's going to be a little gross, but it's totally worth it because you'll have nice, happy, healthy chicks. Did you have anything to contribute about, because you did brooding in your house, right?
Yeah, it was in the bathtub. I mean, in tubs in the bathtub.
Yeah.
Well, I put newspaper down first, and then I put the shavings on top of it so that I could roll it up.
There you go. That's a great way of utilizing it. Yep. And then you've got another layer of newspaper underneath.
But they're really good at kicking all the pine shavings into there too.
Oh, so good at it.
And if they kick enough of it in there when it's still on the floor, it'll just suck it right out and it'll be in a wet environment.
Oh yeah, because you also don't want that. You don't want this to like
No.
fall over and start to flood, because if they get wet, they're more likely to get cold, and you don't want that to happen. You want them to be nice and dry and happy. So if this does tip over, just take them out, throw on a towel or something, change the bedding out, make sure that it's nice and dry in there before you put them back in. Make sure that their heat lamp is of a good height and that it is back at that temperature, 90 to 95 degrees from when you first get them, so that first day, and then 5 degrees down each week after that, because they'll start to be able to produce their own heat more, and they'll be developing feathers, so it'll be their own sense of insulation. When they're nice and fluffy like this, it's not a lot of insulation for them. So you want to make sure that they stay nice and warm. The food, it's like a small trough for chicks, and it works really well. It's about this high, and they can lean right over. You're going to have a completely different style of feeder as they grow up, something that they won't kick over or try to lay in and stuff like that. But the little trough works really well. Some people use like Tupperware lids and stuff like that. You just want something with a low side, something they can actually get into. If it's too tall, they can either get stuck in it or they won't be able to reach their food. So you want to make sure it's actually accessible to them. So going back to the heat lamp, you can get heat lamps at Murdoch's, you can get them at a lot of hardware stores, and you just want to be very careful with fire dangers. Some people, so this, for example, this was one of my friend's brooders, it was like a big refrigerator box kind of thing, and that didn't work out so hot. So you got to think about cardboard and heat, and it was a little bit too close to the cardboard and we started smelling some smoke. So you want to make sure that whatever you have your heat lamp mounted on, that is not going to catch fire. And if it is, that your heat lamp is far enough away from it that it's not causing issues. Same with distance from the ground. If your heat lamp is all the way down almost to the ground, first of all, it's going to be too hot for your chicks, and it might be a fire danger as far as having it right next to pine shavings and that sort of thing. So you want to be aware of that stuff. Common sense, though, as long as you're using common sense, you'll be good to go. Playing time. You want everyone to come in and hold the chicks. Keep some hand sanitizer next to the box or something like that. But this is where you're going to get them accustomed to you and accustomed to being picked up. Chickens are pretty funny once they get older. If they've been handled a lot, some chickens love it. They'll just walk around with you. They'll sit on your shoulder like a parrot. Some chickens will not be into it, even if you've held them from a kid. So you want to make sure that you at least put the time and effort in from the beginning, that it'll set you up for a good possibility that they'll be well-handleable chickens. If you do need to handle a chicken, a full-grown one that isn't responding well, flip him upside down, hang him by his legs, he falls asleep. It's really, really easy. Like 2 seconds, he's unconscious, and you can just walk around with him like this. So just make sure you flip him over. Yeah.
The chicks loved it too. I didn't hang them upside down by their feet, but I'd roll them over on their back and stroke their breasts.
Oh, yeah.
And they'll fall asleep, which is pretty funny.
And it's so cute.
The one especially would just, everything went out. Limp.
Just
The
loving
daycare
it.
kids loved it.
Loving life. So the first 60 days, and then after the first 60 days, they're going to be a little bit hardier. So that's when they're going to be pullets, and then they'll be developing into chickens. So you'll be able to move your chickens out into a coop once they have feathers. If they don't have feathers, if they're still little fluffy guys, they're not ready to be outside, even if it's the middle of summer, because things are just going to eat them, and they won't be able to defend themselves, and even at night, it'll still be too cold. So you want to make sure they have feathers before they go outside. You want to make sure that they have enough room, about 4 square feet per chicken inside the hen house as far as floor plan goes. Chickens like to get up high when they're sleeping, so something like a broomstick or some nesting boxes are really great, and they'll just pile right in there and they'll get nice and comfy. Using something like straw or any kind of insulation like that is also really nice. They really enjoy bedding down and that kind of stuff. You want to make sure that they have enough room outside too. 10 square feet per chicken is usually a really great amount for a run, whether it's a permanent run outside. There's also chicken tractors, which work really well. Chicken tractors is like a coop or a run, but it's mobile. So it's something where if you have a half an acre, then you can start your chickens in one corner for 2 days, and then you pick up the whole chicken tractor with the chickens inside and move it into the next spot. And it's a great way to keep things fertilized. They'll eat the grass, and it's a nice way to not kill the grass in one spot. Unless you are fine with killing the grass in one spot and you're okay with that, it will turn to dirt eventually. They'll love the grass until then though. So some things to keep in mind when you're designing your run, this space. You also want to think about predators. Predators can come in from above, they can come in from the side, and they can come in from underneath. So you want to think about protecting your birds. Up here, we don't have as many kinds of predators as chickens would have down in Denver or at lower sea levels, but you still want to be aware of it. Having things like, a chicken wire roof can protect from hawks. Some people do it, some people risk it. It's totally up to you. When you build the sides of your run, if you're using chicken wire, I always suggest burying it a couple feet, 1 or 2 feet, something like that, to be able to deter anyone who's going to burrow underneath and try to come get your chickens that way. That would be things like skunks and stuff like that. They love chickens. You want to protect your flock. Flooring, pine shavings, any kind of straw or hay. The most important thing is knowing that you can get in and clean it. That's also important to remember during the winter time too. Is it something that you're going to want to go in and clean? Okay, if not, you're going to have to invest in putting more layers of insulation on top of the soiled insulation, so that way they won't be rolling around in their own poop, and they'll have something nice and fresh to stay warm with. And then know that come springtime, you're going to have about this much compacted whatever kind of flooring that you decided to use. And I will tell you right now that the smell of the ammonia from all the way down here, if you left it there from last fall, it's going to knock your socks off. So I always suggest being able to get in there and clean. One of the challenges also up here in wintertime with chickens is that a lot of it will freeze. So if you've got a freezing issue, you want to make sure it's something that you can get in with a shovel to be able to get out. If your chicken coop is so small that you can't get in there, it's going to be a challenge to clean. You just want to make things as easy as you can for yourself, and the best way of doing it is just setting it up right from the beginning. If you have a coop that's too small, putting a hinge on a wall and making the wall a door is also sort of a cheater's way of making it something that you can actually get into. You want to make sure you've got a good source of food and water, a formulated layer feed, because there are different kinds of feeds for layers versus meat birds. You want to make sure you know what you're getting, so that way they're getting the right kinds of nutrients to do the activity that you want them to do. And then water. Most people use like a hanging water bin. It's a kind of cylinder that then creates a seal at the bottom, so there's like a small circular trough of water, and then it just slowly lowers as the chickens drink the water. Again, another important thing in wintertime is that water freezes, and you want to make sure that your chickens have access to water during the winter time. So there's a couple of different ways you can handle that. You can either be the diligent ice chipper and go out there and make sure that the ice isn't on there and you don't chip it off the water bucket, or you can use a heater, making sure that either that red hot lamp is like oriented over the water to keep the water from freezing, or you can actually get a water heater that's submerged in the water to keep it from freezing. Both of those two options though require electricity, so you want to make sure that you have access to extension cords and plugs and that sort of thing. Winter takes a long time up here, so it's good to be prepared for it. And again, you want to make it as easy as you can for yourself by planning ahead. Treats. My favorite part of chickens, because that's why they love you, is treats. They don't eat treats the same as we do. No chocolate cake for the chickens, anything like that. But they are great little composters. Vegetables, fruits, any kind of bread or grains, that sort of thing, that's great for them. You don't want to give them sugars, anything like really, really sweet. It'll wreak havoc with their digestive system. And again, this is a treat. This should not be their main source of nutrition. Things like chicken scratch, like cracked corn or wheat, are pretty fun. They go nuts for things like watermelon.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, they love it. So it's fun, and treats are a fun thing to throw out to your chickens. You don't need to do a trick for it. You can just hand it to them and they love you for it.
But you have to buy the formulated chicken food too. You can't just give them lettuce.
No, that's why I said that
scraps.
the treats is not the main source of nutrients. Treats are just what they are. They're treats. They're not a main source of nutrient. You gotta have a formulated chicken feed, otherwise
And
they're
what's
not.
in that?
a formulated chicken meat. It's
Yeah.
just the right, just like a dog food. It's of the right amount of nutrients for whatever it is that you want them to do. A layer is going to have more calcium, whereas, you know, a
Oh,
meat
okay.
bird is going to have more, you know, bodybuilding
Yeah.
kind of proteins. So it depends on what you want them to do, but you do need a chicken food. Sometimes they'll, you can have the chicken food in another hanging kind of thing inside of the coop, or some people also have it hanging outside. You just want to make sure that it's covered, and that's something too that you want protected from rodents. You don't want to have a lot of rats and mice and that sort of thing. They love chicken food too, so you want to make sure that wherever it is that it's not accessible by vermin. Yeah.
Where do chickens poop? Do they poop and pee inside and outside? or
They
do
poop, and so first of all, just like most birds, they poop and pee from the same orifice. So it comes out in one, and they do it wherever. You will never be able to potty train a chicken. They will poop wherever they want to all the time.
And it's inside and outside?
Inside, outside, all the time.
Okay.
That's why it's important to
Do
be
they
able
do
to
it in
get
the nesting box?
That's why it's important that you need to get into the coop to be able to clean it out because of how much they poop inside. They will poop in the nesting box, they'll poop on their eggs, they'll poop on each other. It's impressive the amount of poop and where they poop. They'll do it all and everywhere.
Are we excited yet?
If you bring your chicken into your house, they will poop there too. For those with special needs chickens, if you feel, you know, especially generous and you want them to hang out with you in the kitchen, know that you might slip and fall.
If they hang out with me in the kitchen, they're not gonna last very long.
No, exactly, yeah.
Do you give the treats, for the treats, do you ever give them like scraps of cheese or hamburger? Or do you ever give them anything like that?
I
It's
don't.
just all vegetarian stuff?
All
It's
vegetarian.
okay.
I think it's really important to stick to as much of a natural diet as possible,
Okay.
and obviously, you know, layer feed is not super natural, but you know, I don't think it's good for a vegetarian animal to be eating meat. It's going to wreak havoc with their digestive system.
They eat worms, so and they eat bugs, that's.
Yeah,
kind
but
of
that's
a-
different than a cow.
Oh, okay.
You know, there's different compositions there. So yeah,
Okay.
bugs and small things like that, that's definitely a nice good protein source. But that's why a lot of like industrial farming places, because they don't have access to bugs and those kinds of protein sources, they will supplement with cow and that sort of thing. It's more of an ethical thing than a health thing. But I don't think it's very good for them to be eating animals that they wouldn't otherwise
dairy.
eat. Yeah, or dairy. Yeah, no dairy.
Also with like, so my mom keeps chickens and she'll often give them her, you know, veggie compost. But in that, she used to include eggshells, but she found that they would cannibalize their eggs.
Yes. So some people give their chickens eggshells as a source of calcium. And I don't like that because you'll get egg eaters. They will turn around as soon as they lay an egg and they'll be like, oh, this is delicious. You fed this to me yesterday. Therefore, it's okay for me to eat today. A nice way of getting your chickens calcium, if they have weak eggshells or if they're laying eggs without eggshells, that's the key, that they are low in calcium. Oyster shells, any kind of those seafood shells, they'll eat that, and it gives them the same amount of calcium, but it doesn't encourage egg eating. They might develop egg eating of their own accord, in which case that's sort of an incurable thing. You know, you either are okay with it or it goes in the pot. It's up to you. Great point though. No egg eaters. So what to do now? Time to get down to the nitty gritty. Some folks have already prepared or in process of preparing their homes and yards. There's a lot of really great resources online, and I tried to compile some of my favorites for you guys to be able to check out. Pinterest has a million coop ideas, chicken tractor ideas. You can go online and get lots of inspiration for how to develop your runs. There's some really cute ideas. One of my friends who has more of an urban farm with her chickens, she has a run that's just a little hoop, a little half hoop kind of thing that goes all the way around the edge of her yard and goes right back into the coop, and the chickens are just doing laps all day long. But they still have a yard, their kids can still play in their yard and that sort of thing. If you're thinking about doing free range, think about your neighbors. Think about how you're going to get your chicks back at night. It's really important that your chickens stay in their coop at night. They might need a little training for this, the first couple nights that they're outside, but once they get it, the sun goes down, they go in their coop. It's really nice. You want to make sure that all that stuff is prepared before you get your chickens, or at least accessible once you have your chickens, and you're getting them ready, you're getting the next step ready. You want to make sure you don't put the carriage in front of the horse too much. A little bit's fine, but not too much. Researching your breeds and companies to buy from. There's a lot of different companies, just like seed companies. There's some companies that specialize in heirlooms. There are some companies that do more on the side of genetically modified, hybrid birds, that sort of thing. I've grown both hybrids and heritage breeds. My experience with hybrid was really, really scary. I got some Cornish X-Rocks, which is a hybrid breed, and they're a hybrid meat breed. And I thought, oh, well, I'm going to have them outside. They're going to be free range. I'm going to feed them an all natural grain. It won't be like their hybrids. They still were. Before they were old enough, their legs were breaking because their breast meat was so heavy that they were just falling forward. And so finally, I just had to kill them all because they weren't surviving themselves. They weren't growing enough feathers to cover their own bodies because they were growing so quickly. Even on a completely natural diet and even completely outside, it still is a hybrid bird. And it was really sad. And then when I went to go collect all the meat and everything, they all had double breasts, even on a natural diet. It was really scary. Yeah.
Do you ever need to wash your chickens?
Oh, do you ever need to wash your chickens? That's a really great question. Sometimes, if they get into something that they shouldn't, like if they get into like some oil or something that could be harmful to them, I would definitely say it's okay to wash them, but you want to make sure that you're using a natural soap, something that isn't going to harm them. Sometimes I'll use like a dog soap, something that you would wash your puppy dog with, because it isn't as harsh on their skin. But if they just roll around in their poop or something natural but just yucky, that's okay. They don't need to be washed. It'll work itself out eventually. And they also clean each other quite a bit too. That's a great question.
This says the Araucana is a purebred. When you say a heritage and this says a purebred, is that the same? What's the difference between what you're calling a heritage chicken?
So a
and
heritage
a
breed
purebred?
is more of an ancient breed, and purebreds can be heritage.
But not all purebreds are heritage, but all heritage are purebred.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So heritage breeds are, the yellow pear tomato of the chicken world. It can be a purebred, but you just want, personally, my experience is you want to stay away from those engineered crossbreeds because it's just really hard as a home farmer to see that kind of thing, even though you're giving them a natural lifestyle, that they were literally just set up from birth to develop that way.
Yeah. Another
Yeah.
question. I noticed that you said that you could, we've successfully done our chickens for 4 years. They're no longer laying. It's time for them into the pot.
Mhm.
But before they do that, you said something about we can buy eggs that are already
Fertilized. Uh-huh.
and then we give each one of these chickens?
Nope, you don't give them to a chicken, you incubate them. Because
So then you're still hand raising them.
Exactly.
If you were to take them to a rooster and they were to get fertilized eggs, do they raise their own chicks?
They will, but you have to let them do that. You can't then take the eggs inside, and it's not as much of a guarantee.
Because they're not good mothers.
Most of them aren't. At this point, they've been so domesticated that they're not as good mothers as they are in the wild. So if you had free-range birds,
They would be.
They would probably do that of their own accord anyways, because they're not going into a coop really. They might go lay some eggs in the woods, and then they would nest on them there.
Right.
It would be a fun experiment, but it wouldn't necessarily be a profitable venture. If you wanted to have a rooster, if you were in an area that was allowed to have a rooster, you could certainly experiment with it, but most of the chickens, I think, would just eat their eggs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but you can buy fertilized eggs and put them in an incubator inside. That's more of a guarantee that they'll remain safe and happy and healthy and develop into their chicks. But yeah, so layers, they lay in a bell curve is the best way of picturing it. So you got to pull it, and basically they lay 6 times a week at their max. So they work their way up the top of the bell curve 6 times a week, whether it's all on, in a few days or spread out through the week. It depends on the chicken. Certain breeds lay different colored eggs, so that's sometimes really fun. You get some interesting stuff that goes on, so sometimes you might notice eggs that have like ridges and bumps on them. Totally normal, totally fine. That's just the way that chicken lays their eggs. We all get so used to the eggs that we see in the grocery store that are so perfect, and they have, no poop on them, and they have, no little fragments attached to them or speckles or anything like that. And that's just because they get rid of those eggs before it gets to the retail market. So you are at the forefront of the eggs. You're going to see all the nitty-gritty eggs. And there's lots of interesting stuff too. You might get really small eggs, you might get big eggs, different colors, different shapes, different textures. So it's really interesting. The only time you need to be somewhat concerned is if there is a really weak shell, like so weak that you can't even pick it up without it breaking, or it's non-existent. So if it's just an egg that's housed in like an embryo kind of like, like a membrane, it's squishy, it moves and that sort of thing, that means that the shell isn't, you can still eat the egg. It's still great, it still tastes good and everything, but it means that they're low on calcium, so that's when you would want to introduce some pulverized oyster shell or something like that. You can either put it in their feed or sprinkle it around in the yard. They love it, they'll eat it right up. So yeah, those are the only concerns that you would ever have with an egg. Otherwise, they're all beautiful in their own beautiful way. Make your purchase. You can either watch the mailbox or go to the store and then enjoy your chickens for years to come. Once they start heading down that other side of the bell curve, it's all up to you how you handle it. If you really want chickens at the top of that bell curve the whole time that you have them, then expect that you're going to have to cut them off at some point and start the next round. You can start younger chickens with older chickens. You want to make sure that they have some sort of separation because the older ones will pick on the younger ones. Sometimes a little chicken wire divider inside of a coop works well if you're going to have any overlap. Otherwise, if you have a chicken retirement home, that is also fine, which I know you are going to have. You're going to have the chicken retirement home. And that's fine as well. Just know that you're not going to get eggs from them anymore.
But you don't raise, so you'll say you've got, your chickens have been laying for 3 years and you're going, okay, now I'm going to add in a few more chickens for next year to start laying, and you don't do that. Is that what you just said, that they peck on each other?
They definitely will, but it depends on how you introduce them. So if you have pullets, so like the teenage chicken, and you're introducing those to the adults, introduce them at night. Because when the chicken wakes up, he thinks, oh, you've been here the whole time, haven't you? If you introduce them during the day, then they'll know that something is wrong. But if you introduce them while they're all sleeping, they wake up in the morning and they think that everything is the same as it was the day before.
The smell's familiar.
Yeah, smells familiar, it looks familiar. Yeah, there's this different bird, but they don't remember from the day before. So if you are going to do that, then make sure that you do it at night. Otherwise, that divider works really well if you're going to be introducing them during the day. Or if you introduce them at night and you find that you do have trouble, you can have that divider in the coop and they'll stay away from each other. All great questions.
So the best way to do that?
The best way to is, first of
Read them
all,
a story and...
so you don't want to
Give them their favorite food.
You don't want to feed them for like a day before you're going to do that, because otherwise they're going to be all full of chicken food and it's going to be really hard to process. So you want to eliminate 1 day of food. And then what I would do is you go in, you flip them upside down, because then they go to sleep. And then the best way of killing a chicken that I've found is a cone. Some sort of metal cone where it still holds them upside down, so they're asleep for all of it. It holds their wings down, and then you can just do a slit across the throat, and then it's just a bleeding out. There's a couple of different ways, though, that I've seen. If you don't mind a little running around, you can use a piano wire that runs through a tube, and you just loop it over their head, and it'll knock their head off. But they are going to run around like a chicken with their head cut off. That does actually happen. So make sure that you're aware that that's going to happen, otherwise it might catch you off guard. Other ways, if you don't mind them being awake, is you can just hold them sideways on, some sort of brick or either, a stump, something like that, and you can use an axe to make sure that it goes all the way through. I don't suggest doing a neck slit if they're awake, because if you're an amateur and you don't really know what you're doing, you don't want them to suffer, and you just want to get rid of the whole head in one thwack. If you are going to do the upside down, they're asleep. They don't know what's happening. They're not going to feel anything. It's just like going under anesthesia. So that way you can do a slit and do a bleed out, even if you don't hit the artery right away.
Or you can just lop it all off too, I guess, right?
It's harder to do that when they're hanging upside down unless you have the cone against a tree, because you need something to hit with the axe in the back in order to actually sever it. You can't just samurai sword it unless you have a samurai sword. Which also might be your prerogative. And again, you want to go back to the zoning regulations. If you are going to be doing any at-home slaughtering, you certainly can. It needs to be out of sight though. Don't do it in front of the school bus. Don't do it, right in front of the neighbors, and, it might be traumatizing to them. And it's important for us to be respectful of those who are more squeamish. But there's a couple of different techniques, and you can eat layer birds. They are still very tasty. You can do a roast, which is a nice way if they're on the older side. They're going to be a little bit tougher, but a nice roast or a crock pot kind of thing is a great way of softening that up.
And how, in your experience, how many years are you getting out of them?
It
Or does
depends
depend
on the
breed.
It depends on the breed, but anywhere from 2 to 3 years, 2 to 4 years.
And you kind of know they're on their downward spiral after the 6 eggs a week. And then you start to-
Exactly. So they'll work their way up to it. They'll have their first egg, and everyone's really excited. And you can have a cake or however you'd like to celebrate. And then it'll develop into 2 eggs a week, 3 eggs a week, 4 eggs a week. It'll slowly develop up to that 6 eggs a week is an average. You might have a bird who does 8 eggs a week. Awesome. Keep them forever. You might have one that peaks out at 5 eggs a week, something like that. So know that that's an average. Every chicken is different. And then they'll start to peter off after that. But if you're the one going in and collecting the eggs, you'll see a lot of the chickens, especially if you go in the morning to collect the eggs, you scoop the bird off the egg and you know who laid who. If the birds are already awake and moving around, it might be harder to identify who's laying what, unless you have breeds that are laying different colored eggs.
But you usually collect them in the morning. They don't lay eggs during the afternoon or at night. You get them in the morning.
You pick them up in the morning, is the best way of doing it. You could pick them up anytime during the day, but you're more likely to have the chickens eat them because the chickens are going to be laying at night.
Oh, okay.
And if
So they do lay at night. That's what I was wondering, if they lay during the day.
Sometimes
No.
they do.
Yeah, most of them lay at night because they feel the safest in the coop, but if they're feeling safe outside, they'll lay it right on the ground. And in the middle of the afternoon, but a majority of them lay at night. That's why it's best to collect in the morning. But if
First
you're
thing in the
out
morning.
there in the afternoon and you see an egg in the middle of their run, it's like, meh, okay, well, go pick it up right then and there.
Yeah.
The longer that the eggs are out, the more likely they are to be pecked at and played with and that sort of thing. And birds do love to play. Throw a golf ball in there, they'll have a really fun time pushing that around. They're pretty fun. They do love bugs. Some really great treats. One thing that I love to do, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the suet holders for for birds outside. They're it's almost like a thing that you would hold toast over the fire with. It's got crisscrossed wires and it closes up. You can throw a bunch of salad greens in there, like some beet leaves and stuff like that, and hang it in the middle of the coop. And because it's swinging, it's like a piñata for them. And they love the greens, and they'll just push it back and forth at each other. It's like they're playing dodgeball. It's really cute. So there's lots of fun ways that you can make their lives exciting, but they're fairly simple creatures, so if you don't want to invest in things like golf balls and greens hanging from the ceiling, they will not be disappointed. They'll be happy.
There's a whole chapter in this book on chicken treats and illustrations on exactly
Oh, perfect.
how you do this little thing. It
And
looks
what-
like a lot of there. See?
What's
Here's
the
this-
book that you have there, just so folks can write it down if they're
Oh, I
interested?
got it at Lowe's.
What's the title of it, though, just so in case anyone else is interested in trying to find
Chickens for the Backyard Homesteader.
it? There you go. chickens for the backyard homesteader. And I've got a couple books on here. I'm a big internet person, so I have mostly links, but those are my top favorites.
Cleaning eggs.
Cleaning eggs. Water and dish soap.
That's what I thought.
Yep, just
But
water and
other
dish soap.
things
You don't
you
need anything fancy, no alcohol, nothing weird. And you don't have to clean them at all if you don't want to. Just make sure that there's nothing too crunchy on the outside because you don't want to be making brownies and have an extra treat fall in there. So
Not that
make
much.
sure to take off the big stuff. If you're trying to make your eggs really presentable, if you're going to have company over or whatever, you can use a little light sandpaper on the eggs, and that'll buff out any sort of like weird stains or anything like that if the soap doesn't take care of it. Light sandpaper. Not 20 grit sandpaper, light sandpaper.
And then the eggs, I was over at a friend's house looking at her coop the other day, and one of the chickens laid right there. And that was so cool, I watched the egg come out, you know? But it was still soft. It needed time to, it was super, super warm.
Oh,
She said,
yeah.
it'll just harden.
As it cools.
Takes about like 60 seconds or something
Yeah.
for it to harden. So you
Right when it comes out, I mean, it is chicken core temperature.
Yeah.
And then it cools down a little bit, and then you want to get them obviously into your fridge as soon as possible. You don't want rotten eggs. Sometimes if you have a coop that has lots of little corners, you want to make sure you check for eggs because they might lay in places that are inconvenient for you to reach to. So make sure you look for eggs because you'll find it with your nose eventually if you leave it there for too long, or they'll find it.
Chicken. This is your chicken.
So if anyone has any questions, I'll just be here packing up. Yeah.
The other comment is they are warm. I mean, their natural body temperature's, 105 or something like that?
Yeah, they're definitely hot
So they're
little
much warmer
creatures.
than we are.
Yeah.
So they aren't running, when you pick them up and hold them, they're not running a fever.
And you were a small animal vet, or you are a small animal vet?
Well, I'm retired, but
Oh, okay.
I'm never gonna stop being.
Have you
a vet.
taken the temperature of any of your chicks?
Nope.
Well, if you want to, let me know how it goes.
Yeah.
Wonderful. If anyone has any questions, let me know. Otherwise, my contact information is in the green guide. I've got cards up here if anyone wants them. I'm here as a resource. This resource page is a great place to take those next steps to learn some more stuff. And then we're here if you have questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for coming, guys.